Super Pumped: The Battle for Uber is on Showtime. It's based on Mike Isaac's 2019 book about the well-known ride-sharing app, and ex-company CEO Travis Kalanick, played by Joseph Gordon Levitt. The premiere is called Grow or Die, and having watched it, did you learn anything?
I think that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is trying to morph himself into being more of an anti-hero. He's played like the protagonist for so long in things like The Dark Knight Rises and basically anything for the past decade or so that like with Mr. Corman and like kind of here, he's morphing himself into somewhat of a villain but still the hero type. Travis
Kalanick is not a hero. In fact, the fact that you think he is just by watching the first episode is concerning, and also goes to why it was part of my bads, because I have goods and bads, and I watched the episode
he reminded me a lot of Jordan Belfort. I felt like this was Wolf on Wall Street entirely, to the point of the freeze frame with the narration and the weird graphics that were being shown.
Do you know who the narrator was?
No, and it took me a while to realize it wasn't actually Joseph Gordon-Levitt until like the very ending. Who was it?
Quentin Tarantino.
It was Quentin Tarantino?
Yeah.
I know that he has narrated for some movies. Well, yeah. I mean, they got like a ton of famous people for this. They had John Bass from Miracle Workers, also Baywatch, the movie. And then they also had, like we said, Bill Gurley, Kyle Chandler. John Michael Higgins even shows up as like Mike Ovis for a couple minutes.
Almost as like a cameo appearance, but not playing himself.
And then Randall Pearson, I recognized, but I didn't know who he was, like him by name.
Richard Schiff, that's the guy from Counterpart. That's who played him. Yeah. And so the casting, besides Joseph Gordon-Levitt, was one of my favorite parts of this. You had Richard Schiff, like you said, but Kyle Chandler, Carrie Bichet, who you probably didn't recognize, but that is the lady from *Halt and Catch Fire*, the wife of Gordon. She was blonde in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was like his number 3 or 4.
Right, yeah.
And then, as you said, John Michael Higgins. Showtime's got a big budget. And you've got people in charge of it, Brian Koppelman and David Levian, who made billions and are now in their final season of that and also doing this concurrently.
Yeah.
So this show has already also been renewed for a second season.
Really, I thought it was just going to be a limited series because I was like, how much more of the story is there really left to take?
Super Pumped is renewed for another season. The Battle for Uber is a 1-season thing. They're going to recast.
Okay. All right.
And it's actually going to follow Mike Isaac, the person who wrote the first book about Uber. He's going to write a book about Facebook. And so now we're going to follow the Facebook series.
It was like the same thing, though. I had it down here. The Social Network is also what this reminded me of, because Travis Kalanick straight up takes the idea we see in like the first 15 minutes from Garrett Camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a lot to say about the second season renewal, but we should probably talk about the first episode here. The name of it, again, is Grow or Die, and it is about how Uber got its funding and then rebranded itself into a rideshare service as opposed to a cab company. Mm-hmm. Because in this first episode, it's still called Uber Cab, and it's still taking place in, 2011 till 2013. Around that time.
They had like the flash forward, and then I felt like they went back to like the present during the middle of it.
Oh, right? It definitely didn't get to 2022.
Well, no, I'm talking about where we first see it, where Travis Kalanick is interviewing the first guy and like, "Are you an asshole?" And then it does the whole entire flashback.
Yeah, but all within the same 6 months or so. Yeah, right. And all taking place in San Francisco, where the app originated, as did almost every rideshare service app at the time. Did you know that Lyft has been around longer than Uber?
I didn't.
So it is interesting how they decided to focus mostly on the Uber fight against San Francisco, and really it was multiple companies having fights with them.
That makes it more realistic, though. It makes more sense that other things.
This is sort of a fanciful version, a dramatized version. However, they tried to stay as close to the book as they could.
I was wondering about that because, at 10 minutes in or so, we get Travis Kalanick. He's speaking to Bill Gurley. He's trying to get funding for
Silicon Valley style.
Yeah, for his app. And I've seen it done in plenty of movies and TV shows the same way, where they had Sorkin-esque writing, and they had the whole entire snappy dialogue. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt says something really profound, and maybe so does Kyle Chandler. But I was like, is that actually how it's done? Is that always how it's done? Because that's always how it's portrayed.
There were so many familiar beats in this episode. Getting into my bad, you have the young tech executive businessman with a beach ball ego, quickly corrupted by capitalism, and he's his own hype man. Usually you have someone else pumping him up. But no. In that way, I understand why they cast him in this role. He can deliver those monologues. He's fun to watch on the screen, but it's still Joseph Gordon-Levitt. His face is so recognizable at this point. It's like when they cast Ashton Kutcher to play Steve Jobs. It takes away from the actual story behind it, and that's why in season 2, when they try to cast Mark Zuckerberg, Like, who are you going to get for that?
Maybe they get back Jesse Eisenberg.
But even if they did get Jesse Eisenberg back, his face still would be, even back then it did. Back then Facebook was in its infancy. It was like 6 years old at the time. Obviously old enough to be like a huge phenomenon for the world. That's why they made the movie. But this is almost double that time has passed. 12 years has passed, and now you have so much more information, so much craziness that's happened on since 2016. What are they going to include? What are they, and all in a season? Like, you make shows based off of Bad Doctors.
Dr. Death.
Yeah, you make shows based off of like porn tapes that get released.
Pam and Tommy, yeah.
Yeah, those are small incidents. Facebook is probably the most controversial company in the world.
How many episodes is this going to be?
I think it is 7 or 8, and the critics got 5 episodes of it. So I think they got the majority of the season.
So they're going to be tackling next season probably with the same amount of episodes.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the familiar beats, though, they don't just end at Joseph Gordon Levitt's impersonation of this tech executive. They also have like the Silicon Valley nightclub meetings that you were talking about. The very familiar, if you watch Billions, flashy, clean offices with snazzy suits.
Information flying a mile a minute, like so much just dense information.
Prone to crazy monologues about being misunderstood or being angry or their vision.
The first 3 minutes was Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He was saying his vision, but it was also just a huge exposition dump. Basically talking about how everyone's coming after them and they were going to fight it no matter what.
That said, did you have a favorite speech of his? Because I have 2.
I like the cease and desist one. Again, it reminded me of Wolf of Wall Street, but I liked it when he like just kind of went out there and stood up for himself, and it was like, this is a birth certificate, and then just drew a smiley face on there and taped it to the wall.
That may have been the disruptor speech, and I agree with you. I like that one.
And there was one more where it was when he was talking actually in the nightclub to Bill Gurley, and then they did I thought it was shot really well, the lights and everything. That was one of my biggest highlights.
It was shot better than The Social Network. If you remember when that came out, and they were like, it's too loud, we can't hear what they're actually saying, and then they were like, but that's how a nightclub actually is, and we wanted to be realistic. And it's like, that's not where you be realistic with your storyline, is not the fact that the audience can't hear what you're trying to tell them.
But I like that when they were like, I was on top of the Eiffel Tower, and then you start to realize as the scene goes on, it was all made up and he's just in front of a green screen, and that's not actually how he came up with the idea. Those are probably my 2 favorite monologues.
And that he took from his friend a lot of the original concept of it and kind of took credit for that.
Right.
It's something that we've seen since the beginning of Apple, basically. I also like the horseshit speech at the very end, where he gives you a little bit of background. I actually felt like that was the most learning that I did throughout the entire episode, about realizing that it wasn't just horse and buggy to car to Uber or taxi to Uber. There was things in the middle. There was public service.
I had a problem with that actually, because it was just like, yeah, the speech was good, but really that was going to convince the mayor to like stop going
I wasn't
after
thinking
them.
about it like that. I was just thinking about it like, I'm learning something. But yeah, you're right. They do try to not spoon feed you, but like wrap it all nice in a tidy bow.
Well, at the very beginning, they do spoon feed you. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I like Quentin Tarantino. I like how he's in the show, but the narration I felt was really unnecessary.
Seriously,
because
I don't know why they have him.
There was like, because Travis Kalanick gets explaining it fine on his own. Okay, you're gonna need to pay to actually get like a safety fee, and then the narrator comes in and is like, for those of you that don't understand, let me English it up for you. And I'm like, I understand completely what they were saying already. I didn't need you to come in and say that.
That is true. It's kind of like, hey, okay, dum-dums, let's talk about it differently. But apparently Quentin Tarantino was really into it, so that's probably like, you're not gonna say no to him.
Yeah.
But why offer it to him? So what were your favorite parts then?
I liked it when it's the only time in the episode where Kalanick is put in check, when Bill Gurley, it was like talking like, you need my money, and then he's like, I don't need shit. Like, I'm going to take this to the top.
There were several times, without the Kyle Chandler meeting, where Kyle Chandler made the face like, this meeting's over. Like, I'm done.
Yeah,
like, he was able to sell that really well, where it was like, this bit, like, it wasn't just, I'm going to cave for whatever you're asking for. Kyle Chandler's a joy to watch. Seeing him not necessarily play the good guy either. He's kind of, we're supposed to like him right now.
Yeah, he might turn evil later. That's usually how these things work.
Mm-hmm. There are other names, like Elizabeth Shue, who plays the mom, Uma Thurman, who's supposed to show up, and she wasn't in the first episode.
I was going to say, I didn't see her.
She's playing Ariana Huffington.
So it's just a lot of people that we've done shows for, such as like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Mr. Corman.
Which I learned because of this has been canceled. There's no season 2 of Mr. Corman. He actually got the part for that, I think, in 2020, like March, and then he got the part in May of 2021. Yeah. So it was shot and spit out pretty quickly.
But then you have also Kyle Chandler, Mayor of Kingstown, and then you just said Uma Thurman, who was in Suspicion as well.
She was.
So these people, while they're like big parts of the show, actually are still doing other things, or were doing other things.
And everybody loves to compare this to Billy and Social Network, Wolf on Wall Street, upcoming Hulu's The Dropout, or Apple We Crashed, 2 other shows about startups, and to mixed reviews. You know, a lot of people are like, it's derivative, it's a copy, and then some of them are like, it's fresh enough. It's Vulture gave it 4 stars, 7 on TV Guide, and so.
If they're keeping to the book, I mean, like, yeah, it can be derivative, I guess, but it
just locks its potential, you know, because dramatization of social media through the filter of Hollywood can only go so far. It's flashy, but it's also tempered because it's untrustworthy. Yeah. When I watch something like this, it's always like, how much of this recount can I actually believe?
I was glad they didn't like release 2 or 3 episodes, because I was like, this is like heavy stuff. Like, I'm enjoying the episode, but I'm not really sure how much more mileage they can get from it, because I just kind of feel like it is the same thing over and over again. I compared it to Succession. It also reminded me of a Nathan For You episode where he literally goes against Uber and shows what Uber has done to the cab industry. So seeing that paralleled with this TV show, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Do you remember the *Halt and Catch Fire* intro?
The one where he's driving and then he like stops in front of a
no the actual like title sequence before they do, like where it had that little like neuron almost like shooting through, and it had the granular synthesizer sound effect in the back. That is used now, not the visual part of it, but the sound effect of the granular synthesizer. That's kind of what this took from, and I'm tired of it. It's like every time we get a tech-based show, there's always a synthesizer in the background, and it's like, yes, we know what it is, and it's just a bunch of little names popping up, and I'm like, you can do better than that.
It's them trying to be creative. Also, did you realize that the whole entire freeze frame, like kind of flashiness they were using, was taken away for a majority of the episode? Like past the 20-minute mark, it just turned into the drama, and then they brought it back at the very end, and it seemed a little bit off-putting.
I did notice that, and the last time I saw it, I was like, yeah, they definitely didn't need that last one.
Yeah.
It did feel placed in there, almost edited in there. Like it wasn't originally intended to be there, and they just added it for context. Yeah, but so Silicon Valley and *Halt and Catch Fire*, those 2 shows are underrated in my opinion, but also, well, Silicon Valley less so.
I was going to say.
But they're underrated because what they do is they're able to show contemporary or past companies, but in the periphery. So by inventing fictional companies, they're able to do whatever they want. They have the freedom to like tell these crazy stories, but then also in like the trajectory of everything they're crossing.
Know where the show is going.
You see things like Yahoo startup, or in Silicon Valley, you see all the other companies that like even company execs wanted to appear in Silicon Valley. And so I think it cuts off its potential every time that it tries to do an actual. Like, they could have done a fictionalized version of Uber. Even BoJack Horseman did a fictionalized version of Uber. Remember Todd was playing, like, the CEO of that, and they were able to make fun of him that way? It's just too... It's like The Imitation Game. Is that the name of the...
That was a Benedict Cumberbatch
Yeah,
movie.
And I hated that movie because of how misrepresentative it actually was of the truth. Sort of like 42. It didn't need its own glamorization of Hollywood to make it the story that it needed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So overall,
that's why I'm scared about the anthology of this being like season 2.
Did you like the episode?
I would give the episode
Yeah.
I would give the episode a 7 out of 10 begrudgingly. I would give the show a 6 out of 10 because I know where it's going. And I can already tell that it's not going to be able to do much more than what it already has.
I agree with you. I actually would give the episode maybe like a 7.5 because I did find. I mean, it's entertaining throughout.
Well, you don't know
I was
the story.
never really bored.
Yeah, you don't know the story.
So, but I understand where you're coming from. I probably give like the overall show like a 6.5.
And how much of a ripoff was it? Sorry for really bashing on it, but to take that scene from the Social Network, probably the most famous scene of it, about where Justin Timberlake comes in and he's like, drop the, right?
Oh,
and do the exact same thing here. You realize the Social Network, because they talked about Zuckerberg, exists in that world, or in the real world
he calls him
by this point. So they would have seen that movie.
So, did it? Yeah, it came out. It came out in 2010.
So when he says something like, "Oh, we're going to change our name to Uber," why would the guy make almost a full reference to a movie that he probably saw.
And apparently that's the big idea that's supposed to kind of like change the whole course of the story. Then again, though, you haven't read the book, so that could be how it comes across in the book as well. We don't know.
There's just no way. But the Kalanick character, the fact that you walked away from this thinking of him as like a hero, or like it does glamorize white collar crime.
Yeah,
that's what these shows do.
And movies
from
as
Billions, to Wolf on Wall Street, it makes it seem like something that you should be proud of versus something that's kind of sleazy and messed up. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the show itself. Is there anything else? Did you think the family portion of it, showing his...
I actually thought that was probably the most boring part. Because like the whole entire kind of, I don't know, tension he has with his brother, I was like, is that really needed? Like, when's that going to, like, if it comes into play later, which it probably will, what's that really going to accomplish?
It did also feel like they were trying to take the relationship that he ended up having with Gurley and like really push the fact that they trust each other. And what is the reason to do that?
Because they're going to backstab each other.
Yeah, because that'll make it so much more emotionally hurtful when something bad happens with that relationship.
I feel like you're foreshadowing it for me, but okay. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just... It's familiar tropes that you're used to seeing in television shows. I do like the whole medallion. Whenever they talk about taxis and medallions, that's a really weird industry. And I'm glad that if you're watching the show, you might learn a little bit more about it. Like the amount of money that medallions actually cost to own a taxi cab have just gone over and out the roof forever. And so Uber did really disrupt it, and the ride sharing service did.
How many people did come up to Travis Kalanick and say like, hey, we can, if you stop doing this, we'll help you? Like Randall Pearson does it, being like, we can put your technology
Randall Pearson
in
was playing the municipal transportation industry. You remember in almost every state, they started suing Uber as far as their taxis at airports. Because it was just getting overwhelming, and Ubers were taking the place of taxis and just cluttering up the whole place. So yeah, there's been a couple of legal hurdles, and still I don't think that they're profitable. Like they make a ton of money, but they also spend a ton of money. So I don't know what the actual balance sheet looks like on that. I do know what the show creators said they made this for. They said they wanted to show what happens when revolutionaries unseat the fascists and then become the fascists. So they definitely want to speak even through Kalanick by showing him talking about how everything gets displaced over time and how it becomes the staple, and then eventually they're what did he say? Their pockets are fat, like they get fat and riches and they get used to it, and then something comes along and beats it. I think the thing that's going to come along and beat up Uber is when we have self-driving like vehicles, and it's just controls. Like it's not going to be the brand.
It's going to be the step to.
There are crazy Chinese companies out there that are almost just as popular, just in different parts of the world, than Tesla. Tesla is really just an American concept that is taken off because of Elon Musk and his.
I wonder when we get self-driving cars, like you're talking about, if we're going to get like self-driving planes as well.
Well, you'll have when I say self-driving cars, I mean more like they made such a big deal about how losing drivers in this. But if they don't have a problem losing drivers and they just have to buy the vehicle, then the whole service changes and it becomes less about a workforce thing, and then no one's getting money in the same way.
It sounds crazy. Yeah.
So the whole industry is going to change in the next like 10 years. But for now, this is an interesting, but to me, sort of boring look at it. That's why I said 6 out of 10. But yeah, when you compare it to something like Wolf on Wall Street or even The Big Short, I've heard it compared to anything.
Yeah, well, The Big Short, I see like less of a comparison, but Wolf on Wall Street had the whole entire like he's going to talk and he's charismatic and he knows what he's doing is wrong, but feels like he can make a profit from it anyways.
There's something so messed up to me though about having a character just sit at a desk and like sulk for the fact that like the rest of their company is spending so much money and we're supposed to feel sorry for him, even though all he's doing is sitting at the desk. Like everybody else is working around you, and yet you're the person we're supposed to sympathize with. I don't know.
I mean, if we're going to see the downfall of Travis Kalanick, then I do feel like it is almost a complete ripoff of just Wolf on Wall Street. Just see 2013, you'll kind of understand it.
In the end, the story of Uber shouldn't be too complicated to tell. So at least they'll be able to do that. I don't feel like there's going to be more things that we're missing. Like they'll be able to wrap everything up in however 7 or 8 episodes that they have.
I feel like they've introduced everything by this point.
But this is like a kid's sandbox compared to like the desert that is Facebook. Facebook is like all the grains of sand in the world right now because of everything it encapsulates. And I understand that they're going to try to like go towards Mark Zuckerberg's relationship with Sheryl Sandberg, I think her name is, and so like focusing on primarily that. But still, like you can't distance the Meta rest of the company.
Did you like The Social Network and how they tackled it?
What's The Social Network like? How was it received?
It got like universal acclaim.
Yeah, so I don't think it deserved that. Maybe like I'm more in the camp of just like, this is a decent movie, decent acting, little boring almost, because I was already anybody in high school or younger was already using Facebook.
But I was talking more about how they tackled the subject matter. Do you think that they actually did a good job with it?
The most thing that I remember is Zuckerberg's response, and how originally he was like refusing to see it, and then he took his whole top execs people to go see it in a movie theater.
Got all the clothes right. That's what he said.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was more about just passive responses to it. I don't think that like in a company this big, you're going to be capable of writing this. Mike Isaac really has a challenge ahead of him. If he's going to put out a book, they're going to adapt the book, and then they're going to be able to like deconstruct that story into next season. I just don't see it happening well.
It's a different avenue when you take something like Uber and then you are going to something like Facebook. But then again, I think that this is also to maybe inform people. I don't know that much about Facebook, even though I saw The Social Network or things that have happened released since, except for like big headlines. So I think that's also made mostly for people like me.
Okay. So you're going to watch it then?
Probably, yeah.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.